Hello, everybody. Good morning. Happy Monday. It's Dave Neal, stand up comic and host of Bachelor Nation News. And in this episode, we have a great interview with our good friend of the program, Dr. Diane Strakowski, to answer a lot of questions we have about how Zach's doing on this season. The question I have is it going to get worse? Are we seeing Zach start to fold under pressure, the way he handles some of the conversations with the women? Of course, there was a big uproar after this past week, the way he was sort of dismissive to Greer in their Zoom chat. And people are wondering, is he being direct or being a dick or a little bit of both? Sometimes it's a little bit of both. There's a Venn diagram between direct and dick, and usually they coincide somewhere in the middle. The question we're asking, is it going to get worse? Is he going to start to exhibit some red flags here? But we're going to let Dr. Diane give us her professional opinion. Have a listen. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, so excited. One of my favorite people to talk to, Dr. Diane Strakowski. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Dave. Now that I have my power back on, I'm doing even better.
Yeah. Well, how did you lose your power? Are you up near San Francisco? Is that where?
We are, and we had an incredible windstorm, and boom, the power went out, and then no Wi-Fi, and I was working from Starbucks.
Well, good to have you back. I had shows in both Santa Barbara and then San Diego, so I've been all up and down the California coast. There's hail and snow. I don't know what's going on, but glad you're safe and sound over there. And I always talk to you when shit starts to hit the fan. The shit's not hitting the fan, but it's piling up, I would say. What are your...
I'm here to shovel it out.
And I wonder, and I have to ask folks like you, family therapists, psychologists, people that are experts, I have to ask these questions because I don't want to label Zach as problematic or other sorts of issues, but we're going to discuss how Zach responded to Greer trying to relate to him. We've all saw the clip. Greer said, I had COVID at the end of year sales. And he goes, this isn't like that. He stops the convo and keeps reiterating that. And I was like, she's just trying to start a convo. What was your take with that conversation?
Oh, Dave, thank you for asking. I've had a lot of thoughts about this. Now, remember also, Zach doesn't have background history, right? He doesn't know that Greer is melting down, that she's got the T tattoo, that there's a lot of hype up before this, that she so desperately wants this date, right? So he's getting a little snippet. And the one thing I think we have to slow down about is I think he got an ick from Greer when she walks in and she says, oh, what should I do? Oh, here's the iPad. And she says, usually I see myself and watch myself in the corner. And he's like, ooh, this sounds like another fake woman who's in it for the followers or something. And then he had to correct her. No, young lady, your little sales job is not the same as my search for love. So I think that was an important kind of part of that. And I think he just responded too abruptly, quite honestly. I mean, it was, some people are also saying good for Zach that he was just direct.
Yeah, and that's for sure a minority from the people I've polled. I'd say less than 10%. But you're right there. She has this fun moment where she goes, oh, I can't see myself. He sees that as she's vain, whereas most people say, no, I just want to show my good angles to you. Like, I just want to present a good version of myself to you. He just vacated the air out of that convo, and he did something. I've seen it a few times when he was smelling fragrances with Gabby, and she was like, oh, Woody, and she was like, haha, and he kind of looked at her like, it's almost like, oh my gosh, bro, like chill out, like and it could be the stress or all these other things, but like, oh boy, it seems like no sense of humor or whatever here, but yeah, all Greer was trying to do was just, insert a little bit of a firsthand, like the comparison was they both had COVID. That's all that needed to happen.
Absolutely. And Dave, I'm completely with you. And not with the minority. I thought it was too abrupt. I thought she was making a very genuine, fair comparison. And what she was really saying is, I know what it's like. I've had COVID and you feel trapped. You feel stuck. And there were 100 different ways that I thought that Zach could have handled it, right? He could have pulled a Matt James. Thank you for sharing, Greer. He could have said, oh, you know how it feels then. You get it, right? To feel trapped, like I'm feeling better and I'm stuck and I'm in quarantine. He could have even said, tell me more about your job, Greer. Now, we don't know if they edited that out, but like there was a switch that he seemed quite dismissive. And so everyone's like, ooh, that didn't feel good. We all say that was not Zach's finest moment.
And it was the first time, or a series of times, we started to see this. But as we mentioned before we went on air, you've seen this pattern. You know, you're a professional. You see things before we do. And by the way, is ick a professional psychological term? Because you're so cool, hip with the culture out here.
It's not in the DSM. It is not in, nor is gaslighting, but lots of people talk about it. In fact, the girls in one of the outtakes were talking about when you get the ick, that it's hard to get back, right? It's hard to like recover when you have the ick.
Is the ick the precursor to the red flag? Do several icks equal a red flag?
An ick is not really, because to me, a red flag, and I have one here, is that person is kind of dangerous. And so I'm really careful, Dave, about using a red flag. In fact, I didn't call Rachel a red flag either because I thought she was just being emotional. Let's not say that this means that you're not good for someone else. Okay. A red flag is like a player. A red flag is someone who's always dismissive. And I think what we're talking about with Zach is a set of behaviors in the moment. He is sick. He has COVID. He's not feeling himself. We know in his ear is the pressure of the show. Got to go. Like otherwise, hey, take a week off. You're not feeling well. But hey, we got to get to the next place and the next place. I mean, this is locked and loaded, right? There's tremendous pressure. And he was robbed of a week. So given all of that, he's still, and I think what's happening, people have asked me the same thing. Is he a narcissist? Is he a diva? Is he entitled? Is he being disingenuous? I'm getting all those questions. And to tick those off, I don't think he's a narcissist, because truly a narcissist really kind of uses people in an unkind way. And we have seen, actually, we've seen Zach have a lot of empathy for the people that he likes. Right? We saw him sit with Katie, listening to her story, being very genuine and very caring. We saw him listening to Brooklyn with her domestic violence story. We saw him with Kat. We saw him with Gabby. So he can have empathy when he likes the person. And so why I say I think he had a little ick with Greer is, to me, you're not one of the people who's probably going to continue. And somebody even asked the question, do you think maybe he self-sabotaged and picked a fight because it wasn't going to go very far? It's kind of like with Christina. You tell me she's dramatic and now I have an out, so I don't have to deal with the issue of whether I want to be an instant stepdad or not.
Right.
So I think when I say I wasn't surprised, for me, this is a continuation of something in psychology, and I'm just a media psychologist. I don't know this for sure. I give a lot of caveats. This is just what I'm seeing on TV with all the edits and all the people that I know and I've treated, that I think he has an anxious attachment style. And when somebody does something that he doesn't like and he needs to be in control and handle the narrative, that's when we see the edge. That's when we see the abruptness that some people called it rude. We see that edge in that moment.
Do you think the show knows this about him when they're in the casting process? Like, do they go, we need the anxious attachment? That's the quadrant of contestant that's going to do well. Is that something that they're looking at?
Yes. You know, there's also just who Zach is, right? People are saying he's the vanilla white guy. But I think we saw a little bit of this with Rachel. We saw when, and I might have said this on your show before, but I'll repeat it, that in attachment theory, which is what I do, you only see someone's edges when they're in a threat situation. You only see who they really are when it's stressful and when the chips are down. So I say we're all like tea. You don't see who's somebody, their flavor until we're in hot water. And he's the hot water boils as the show goes on. So episodes 1 through 3, he's still in control. He's got multiple people. The stress mounts when you get close to the end and maybe somebody self-eliminates or you realize that you don't get to have total control. And that's when things get tough. And when Zach was in this position with Rachel, and I still go back to that, like there was some code word that we're just going to say we have differences. And then all of a sudden he came around a bit dramatic and said, you know, she's one person this way, one person this other way. And that to me felt like the anxious, angry person who was hurt.
Yeah, because in that way, he's controlling. And I feel like with couples counseling, the last thing you want to do is say you or point the finger. But the narrative was, she wasn't who I thought she should have been. And then once we saw the way he acted with Greer, you go, maybe he acted this way in the fantasy suite. And Rachel was like, don't talk to me like that. So, because I feel like Greer in a situation where she would have had a little bit more control, like there's still like a damsel in distress, like, oh, I'm so excited to talk to him. She, you can almost see like her eyes going like, what the hell just happened? I would be so shocked if she doesn't continue to press him on the next episode with like, for like being like, hey, just so you know, like that didn't go over well with me. But yeah, what do you think? Do you think that's he's too quickly to put the blame on Rachel?
Yes, because I think if we just go back to other ways that Zach could have handled it, he could have said nothing. He could have said, thank you very much. We both determined that we were different, but it felt like an anxious person sometimes because they feel so out of control that they want to like assert more control. Like, I want to have the last say. I want this narrative to be correct. And that's how it felt like with Greer. Like, I have to correct you. And one could say, I mean, I've read a lot of comments about this. Why isn't Greer's job just as important as his search for love?
And especially like read the room, Zach, 90% of your audience is women. Do you see this in couples counseling where there's a power dynamic where one person makes more money so they feel like they're more important? Like does this play out as a normal concern in relationships?
Absolutely. And here's what I would be moving them towards. Okay. So if I was working with Greer and Zach, and they were a couple and they came in, and I would say, hey, Zach, can you see how what Greer's talking about? She's actually trying to make a bridge here. She's just comparing the affect of being trapped and stuck. It's not literal. Okay. Like that's where we went wrong, that he was thinking like literally you're comparing these two things saying they are the same. And she's just saying the feeling is the same. So I would want to help Zach see that that's, and he said, you know, I know you don't have any bad intentions, but she was like, oh crap. And now the second go round where I'm trying to fix it, and it's almost like it gets worse. And he has to double down again. And you're like, oh God, Zach, just back off. To your point, like, let's just lighten up here.
Yeah, it felt like he was doing the Irish step dance on thin ice. I'm like, Zach, what are you doing? Like, you're wasting more, you're expending more energy than just saying, yeah, it is the same. And look, we are all the star of our own show. And I have to remember that my wife's time is as valuable to her as mine is to me. And we have to be so respectful. And it was just a situation where it seemed like it could be so avoidable. Where do you think Zach's going to go moving forward with this season? Do you think we're going to see more? No, because obviously it's pre-taped. He doesn't get to listen to Dr. Diane Strakowski, her advice, or else the show might be way more boring. But where do you see him going the rest of the season? Thank you so much for listening to this conversation, but it's not over. I'm going to air the full interview on today's Bachelor Rush Hour podcast. Now, some people haven't been educated properly on what a podcast is. I understand our audience comes in all different shapes, sizes, ages, and so there's a generation that grew up before podcasting. It's like the radio. Okay, so if you don't listen on your cell phone, that's totally fine. There's a website. I'll post the link below. You can just click on it and then listen this way. It's virtually the same exact thing. But of course, we have to promote the new podcast, Bachelor Rush Hour. You could also go to my Linktree, which is a website, linktree.com/Dave Neal. And from there, you can actually see all the different places you can listen. And you can click one of these buttons if you have any of these apps on your phone or can download them. Or you can just listen straight from the Linktree. See, it's just like YouTube, except it's audio only. I want to let people know that because some people are very worried. How do I listen to the whole thing? I only support you on YouTube. It's just a different click of a button. It's a way to diversify revenue streams in case the big old YouTube goes away one day. We've got the podcast as well. So anyway, you can check that full conversation out starting at 3 p.m. East Coast time today. We'll have the rest of that. It's a beautiful, amazing conversation. And much thanks to Dr. Diane Strakowski for stopping by. More content coming your way. I'll be live at 7 p.m. East Coast, 4 p.m. Pacific for our pre-show and after-show live stream today. We'll talk to you in a little bit.